I wanted to say welcome you to and tell you a little bit about our speaker tonight. She's everyone's friend, as I noted earlier, but she is somebody that's we all know her. Dolores and her husband Leon have been coming to the Wichita show for many years, all the way from Pennsylvania, driving across, and they would stop at malls and shops along and take them 2 or 3 days to get here, but they had a ball and enjoyed that. In 2010, and that's what, 12 years ago or 11 years ago, they were our Sunday morning postcard seminar speaker, and they told us about Hawaiian postcards. When we initiated this postcard speaker series in last January for our monthly club meetings, Dolores was one of the first to volunteer and say, well, I'll give a program for you sometime this summer. Well, those months rolled around, and here she developed this program today, Christmas in July, and promised us a look at her Christmas tree real photo postcards. This is a topic that we're all familiar with, and through the years with our parents and families. We're delighted to have Dolores show and tell us about this Christmas time tradition. I think we'll all learn some things. Please help me welcome Dolores Rowe to our virtual stage. Dolores?
Well, hi, everybody. It's really great to see so many people. Christmas has always been my favorite holiday. I remember when I was a little kid sneaking down the stairs with my sister before my parents were awake, looking at the tree, looking at what was under it. A lot of times there was one thing maybe not wrapped, and maybe a doll or something like that that we could see, but we couldn't touch anything. But it was just wonderful. And as I became an adult, I started collecting vintage ornaments and Santa Claus figurines. I'd been collecting postcards for a long time before I realized there were real photo postcards of Christmas trees. So I started looking for those. Now, no matter what your religion or lack thereof, you all know about Christmas, because apart from the reason for the season, one of the most enduring symbols is the tree, which started to show up in public places, stores, in town squares, and in other churches. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about trees before we show the first card. The first recorded Christmas trees in this country were decorated for children in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And they were wooden pyramids that were covered with evergreen boughs. And they were decorated with apples and other edibles, maybe cookies. And they had candles at the ends of the wooden projections. But that was nothing like the trees that we have here. Surprisingly, the first actual decorated fir tree was introduced by the Hessian soldiers during the Revolution. Now, they were the mercenaries that came to fight against the Americans, but they had a regular tree like we think of that they had used at Christmas. And those kinds of trees started to come around in 1800s. And again, they were decorated with homemade things, paper chains, popcorn, cranberries, empty egg cups that they would save and color and put things in. And then they started to appear in churches. Well, here's one that has a church. Usually the church had 2 trees. Now, not always, and usually they were on either side of the altar. Of course, this is not an altar, but you can see they do have 2 trees. Now, one of the things I want you to notice is that they have garland. Almost every tree that I have a picture of had garland, which is very interesting. Tinsel didn't come about until the 1930s or so. But I have a couple unusual looking trees, and the next one is going to be one of those. This is a Christmas wheel. Now, it looks just like a Ferris wheel. Maybe it is. I don't know. You can't tell the size of it from here. But you can see that it's all decorated with greens. There might be some ornaments in here, it's hard to tell. But when we were practicing, Hal and Alan said that it looks like there's actually seats on this. So I'm not really sure. If anybody knows the history of this, I couldn't find it on the internet or in any of my Christmas books, but this is a Christmas wheel. It was not sent through the mail, but it had a note on the back. This is the Christmas tree at the Methodist Episcopal Church, Olivet, Michigan, 1909. So I thought that was pretty unique. The second one is another wheel that has Christmas written on it, some greens, the paper chain. And again, it looks like it has seats, but it looks like it's in a church because there's an altar there and there's a pew. So I don't know if these were miniature Ferris wheels or what they were, but I thought they were quite interesting. This one puzzled me for a long time. I thought it was in a school because it has a chalkboard and it has music. But the message on the chalkboard says, Grandma's Love Letters, a Christmas Gift, Goodwill and Peace, December 24th, 09. Now, some of the words are cut off on the right, but the sender refers to it on the back of the card as a Christmas wheel. And it was mailed from Smithville Plains in 1910. I don't know the state because I can't read it. So one of you may know where that is from. As trees started to come around more frequently in the 1840s, so did commercially made ornaments. But most Americans didn't have the money to spend on them. So in addition to the edible things that they made, one of the things that did come out was called Victorian Scrap. They were usually made in Germany. You could buy sheets of them, like 10 Santa Clauses on a sheet with a piece of paper between them, and you could cut them apart and you could use them to decorate. Well, in this particular tree, at the bottom by the girl's head, you can see a Santa Claus. He is a scrap ornament. His head is scrap. His little basket is scrap. His body is cotton batting. And then there is a angel towards the top of the tree. Again, she was a scrap that they put tinsel around. And they like to use tinsel. You can see that there are all kinds of bows and gewgaws and so forth made out of tinsel on the tree. So that was the next step from the homemade ornaments to these scrap ornaments. Now, some of the scrap ornaments were much more elaborate than these, and they might have had cellophane behind them. And over the years, you can't find very many that have the cellophane still intact, but they're still very, very pretty and they look beautiful on a tree. Not a Christmas tree, obviously. I could find no history on this either, but this is a totally elaborate Christmas arch. I'm sure it's attached to the ceiling somehow. It might have a wooden frame. You can see garland everywhere. You can see some of those scrap ornaments. There are a couple glass ornaments, which we'll talk about soon, but the little girl must have, that dollhouse must have been her favorite thing because it's in the center of that arch. And I have one other arch card that we'll look at next. Now, this is not nearly as pretty, but it's not decorated. It's just the boughs and the garland. It looks like popcorn garland and it looks like tinsel garland. If you look across the center of the tree and towards the bottom, there is a rod that goes across, and there are candles on there to light for the illumination, since we had no electricity at the time. And obviously this is before Christmas because there are no gifts out there yet. The family's proud of its Christmas cactus, which is sitting there. So that's another example of a Christmas arch. This is one of my favorite cards. Although it's in terrible condition with creases but look at those sweet little faces. And the tree, which has now glass garland, large glass garland and small, not many other ornaments, just a few. But my heavens, look at the toys. Teddy bear, that sled with the swan heads on the front. You have some kind of a grater for a little boy over here and a windmill and dolls. But the real topper for this card for me is on the back, it says December 26th, 1915 at Grandpa's. Now, if they got all this at Grandpa's, think of what they got at home. So this family must be very well off. I have no idea why the tree is outside. I have several cards that have the trees outside. I don't know if it's because there wasn't room inside. I've not found any information, but that's one of my trees outside. The second card is the same. Another outside tree. Nice glass top on it. Spike, right? And again, there was a garland and it's more ornamented, but the little girl doesn't have quite as many toys. She has a neat little piano and, some books and things. As an aside, I looked up when the first White House tree appeared, and it was in 1857 during James Buchanan's presidency, which is kind of surprising to me because he was a bachelor. And the other thing I found out was that the first national tree appeared in the administration of Calvin Coolidge in 1923. So trees have been a big part of our history for a while. Early trees obviously had no electricity. They were lit with candles, and lit candle tree pictures are harder to find. I wanted to show you this because you can see the glow of the candles. It always scared me to death. But surprisingly, according to my research, fires were not common. We have to remember, first of all, that these houses were not centrally heated. And so they were colder than now. And supposedly the candles were placed in safe locations, and there was always a bucket of water nearby. But it still looks scary to me. Another one with a lit tree. And you can see at the top, those candles are blazing up there. This little girl had a haul. I counted 8 dolls, 2 teddy bears, a dollhouse and a tea set, a bed, all kinds of interesting things. So those are examples of lit trees. Boy, that Santa's enough to scare anybody. I think it's a real person because the hands look real, but the mask is horrible. It could be the daddy, who knows? But I wanted to show this card. It does have some tinsel, which was unusual at the time. But what it has is a new kind of decoration that came from a cottage industry in Lauscha, Germany. They began making these ornaments. You can see a bird on the right-hand side of the card, which has a spun glass tail. And then there's a basket underneath that's glass. And up top, there are a few ornaments. Well, they were made by ladies in this town who blew the glass into molds. And then it was silvered inside. Then they painted them. Sometimes they added other things like wire wrapping and tinsel and some of the scraps. And they became very well liked and are highly prized by collectors today. The interesting thing is that Woolworth's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania was the first one to import these. And he only ordered 144 because he thought they would never sell. They sold out in a day. So they ordered 216,000 216,000 ornaments in 1909. 216,000. And it's estimated that the total sales between 1880 and 1939 were over 500 million of these things sold. So that's very interesting to me that now World War I disrupted this because obviously Germany wasn't shipping things to us. And we started having to make our own ornaments. And you probably all remember the shiny brights, the round ornaments. Some of them were oval, some of them had indents in them. But that was what was made later. Another interesting story about these ornaments is there is a man named Christopher Radko. He's is living now. When he was a young child, he knocked over his grandmother's tree that had all these antique ornaments on it. And she told him he ruined Christmas. Well, of course, he was crushed as a child. And as he grew up, he decided he wanted to have some of this type of ornament made. So in 1986, he started to have some of these types of ornaments made in Germany, Italy, and Poland. They're bigger than these. They're not as delicate. They're more intricate and they're large, but you can still get Christopher Radko ornaments today. Obviously not a real photo postcard, but I wanted to show you, this is my National Postcard Week card. I wanted to show it because what I did was I took a picture of my tree, which is more densely decorated than this, but I sent it to Rick Geary, who's this wonderful postcard artist that does the Wichita cards and cards for other folks. And I said, this is my tree. I want you to make sure to put certain ornaments on it. And these are the ornaments that I'm talking about from Lauscha. The big bird in the center, the cockatoo, was the first ornament my husband ever gave me. And it's the largest one I've ever seen. I have 4 or 5 cockatoos. This one is at least 12 inches long. And it's always on the front of my tree. There were also houses. You can see houses both to the left and to the right of the bird. The violin next to him, I didn't tell Rick, it's really a viola, so it has a lot longer playing, the stem. And then up at the top, you can see a little girl's head. That's another one of the Lauscha ornaments. She has a little cap on and her hair sticks out. And there's a Santa in a dirigible on the other side and an angel next to him. So these are all examples of ornaments I've found that come from that area of Germany. Well, this is a totally enormous tree. I don't know how they ever got it in the house. You can see garland, garland, and garland. But the reason I included this card is on the right-hand side, there is a feather tree. Now, feather trees were again made as a cottage industry in Germany, and they were popular in the mid-1800s in Europe. But they didn't get here till 1913. And guess who sold them? Sears Roebuck. They were the first people to advertise these trees. They came with a wooden cylindrical base, which this person has the base in a pot, so it looks fancier. Had the straight trunk, and then the little branches that came out on the side. And this was modeled after trees that were common in this area of Germany where they were made. Now, it's called a feather tree because they took goose feathers or turkey feathers usually, dyed them green in most cases, although there are some that are pure white, dyed them green, wrapped them around the branches, put paper mache holly at the end, little buds of holly, and then usually some of the branches had metal cups for the candles. We had these around until about the 1930s, and then they didn't stay in popularity. This is the first artificial tree, and collectors really want them today. They're highly sought after. Well, I'm sure you've all heard the song, I'll Be Home for Christmas. And one of the phrases in the song always puzzled me. It said, with presents on the tree. I'm like, what do they mean, presents on the tree? I mean, we always had presents under the tree. And then I found postcards with presents on the tree. And this is one of them. There's hardly any decorations on the tree, actually, except for the presents, which are clothes. Now, down at the bottom, he has some cool little things. He's got Farmyard Friend, the 3 bears, Mother Goose, an alphabet book, but the presents are on the tree. Now, here's one where the actual presents are on the tree, wrapped still. So it just amazed me. You can see there's a teddy bear at the top. Then there's all these packages and envelopes, not many other decorations, some popcorn garland. And this was from Bear, Vermont. I think that's how you say it. Maybe it's Bar, sorry. But anyway, there's your packages on the tree. There are other reasons to collect pictures of the postcards of trees, and that's what's under the tree. And you've already seen some of those things, but this one I picked as an example because it has a huge Putz, P-U-T-Z, which was a German name for a Christmas village. And the tradition was rooted in Moravian churches. And in this card, you can see a train, houses. There's a Santa right in the middle holding 2 American flags. And there's dolls and animals, all kinds of things under the tree. There is a fence in front of it. I'm not sure what this fence is made of. I don't know if it's mesh, metal, chicken wire. I don't know what it is, but to keep the putts safe. And again, this example has the feather tree on the side. Okay, well, there's the feather tree. Another very elaborate putts. The church is just unbelievable. The fence is made out of wood, and these, again, are highly collectible by people that want vintage Christmas today. There are tons of people in this vision. It looks like soldiers going up on the left. I'm not really sure. I can't get much closer to that. Again, you've got garland, that's popcorn, and glass ornaments. There is a manger down in the right-hand corner. It goes without saying that besides the putts, there are toys under the tree. And you've already seen a bunch of cards with great toys, but now I want to show you some other ones that I think are quite interesting. Okay, you can see that there's blocks and that there's the girl with 2 dolls. But what really attracted me to this card was the boy. He has in his hand a cylindrical cardboard container that contained Tinker toys. You and I probably all had Tinker toys. The paddles on the windmill that he has bought says Tinker Toys. I was enamored by that. I thought that was so cool. Of course, he also has the obligatory gun for little boys that love them. And the tree is decorated with a garland of popcorn. Here's another little boy holding a gun. Sorry, people. Anyway, under his tree, he has games. He has Snap right by his chair, Mutt and Jeff cartoons, Dominoes, which is that thin box next to him, and Foxy Grandpa, which appears on postcards. There's also a doll bed, so maybe there's a sister someplace, and it looks like there's a fire truck. Another cool thing about this picture is that image of a woman on the wall. This is a very politically incorrect card, but I wanted to show it. One of the toys is the Darky 10 pins, which is a bowling game with little black boys, and you rolled the pin to knock them down. Also, if you go straight down from the darky 10 pin, there's a thin, narrow figure, and that is the Alabama coon jigger that performed a dance. So, it's incorrect now, but it's interesting as a part of history. And there are other things under there. I will talk about the Santa Claus in the next picture, but he is called a bellsnickle, so we'll see him in the next picture. Okay, this one has a little black doll coming out of a log house, a little doll house, ladders. But the thing in this one I wanted to show you was the bellsnickle, which is the Santa Claus on the left side. These were made in Germany, and they were paper mache, and many of them were hollow so that you could remove the feet and you could put candy inside. He always had a little tree with him. Rarely he had a switch. He was a crotchety guy, and he was part of the Pennsylvania Dutch traditions. These are highly prized by collectors. The most common, of course, is red, just like with postcards. If you can find purple, blue, gold, other colors, they're much more collectible. But you can see the tree. I assume it's a tree. There's branches all around the place, but it has some of the Victorian vintage ornaments, and it has tinsel. Okay, this was set in 1908, and what caught my eye on this, besides her wonderful toys, was the pillow on the left-hand side, which has a swastika on it. And I'm like, what is this doing in here? Even though I know that there are postcards with Native Americans that have this symbol, and I knew that meant good luck, it was still interesting to me. So Alan asked me a question, and I kind of researched it. And it turns out that this symbol has been found as long as 6,000 years ago in cave art, which fascinated me. And it also was very common in the Asian religions, such as Buddhism and Hinduism. It was a sign for divinity and good luck. And in the Native American culture, it's called the whirling log or the rolling log. Now, Hitler didn't come about until about the 1930s. Some people said it depends on how the wheels are, if they're left or they're right. But actually, in the religions I spoke of, they could be either way. But when Hitler took it over, the wheels arms went to the right. And of course, he kind of ruined the symbol regardless. But that's what I found out about the swastika. And it was called a swastika in those religions as well. Well, obviously, this is a reference to World War I. It has flags from America, Britain, Japan, France, and I think Russia. And there are artillery shells along the bottom with a sign that says, "This is for the Kaiser." So obviously a political statement. It also has another sign on the top right edge, which I'm sure you can't make out, but with a magnifier, I read it. And it says, "In memory of our boys in France." Now, we discussed where this might have been displayed. I was thinking maybe a USO, but Hal thought maybe it would have been in a store window, which I think is very possible because of the background. We also discussed the poles on the left-hand side, and that almost looks like a setup for your campfire with a bucket underneath. But even this card has a little putz underneath it with a few animals and a fence. Now, before we go to the next one, which is my last card, I want to tell you that I also collect real photos of twins. This card has twins, adorable little twins dressed the same, a boy and a girl. He has his drum, she has her doll. But if you look up from the boy's head, and Alan has graciously showed this, made it larger, there are twin dolls in a box. And to make it even better, the decorations are postcards. What could be better than that? I mean, this card was this top rang all my bells. So again, it has popcorn garland, not many ornaments except for the postcards, a huge doll at the top, and it's just one of my favorites. So those are some of the joys of collecting real photo postcards of Christmas trees, people. Merry Christmas. That's
Wonderful,
all, folks.
wonderful. Thank you, Dolores.
Oh, you're welcome. Were candles placed on early Christmas trees? Yes, they were.
And we saw good examples of those.
Yes,
for
and they
sure.
even had specific holders for them. Some were made out of lead, and they had a lead drop to them like a plum that would hold them straight. Some were like little glass cups, and you put the candle inside, and they were, of course, much safer. I didn't have any images of those to show, but they were on early trees.
Very good. And let's see, presents under the tree for sure. Really nice. The Foxy Grandpa that you mentioned during your presentation, that there are postcards of Foxy Grandpa. It was a cartoon series, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
I think so too. Yeah, yeah. And Dolores, the feather tree, I know that I think you have one or maybe more in your collection.
Yeah, I have one.
The fact that when you get through after Christmas, we have one, and then you're supposed to bend the branches up, and then you roll it up in newspaper or something and store it for the duration until it's time to get it out.
Mine does not fold up. It's very fragile at this point.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just put it as it is and store it. Now, there were other ornaments I didn't talk about because I didn't have good pictures of them, but there were kugels, which are great big round balls that some people call witch balls because they were supposed to keep away evil spirits. And they came in all kinds of sizes. And there were Dresdens, which are ornaments that were made out of cardboard and pressed into a mold. So there's all kinds of things you can learn about Christmas in studying it or looking at postcards.
Sure, sure. That's wonderful. Just great.
All right, well, thank you.
Are there any other questions or anything? You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question.
I've got a question.
Nobody asked me where I got these cards.
Go ahead.
Because it isn't, most people don't have such a category. And I don't even remember where I found the first one, but I look under Christmas. I look under real photo. And of course, sometimes I just say, do you have any pictures of Christmas trees? And usually people just have printed ones, and I don't want printed ones. They also show me German or French ones, and you can tell that they are not American because they have an angel in them, or they're hand colored, or they have something that's not a real photo of an actual Christmas morning tree. And I don't want those. I want the ones that show the history of the tree and the day.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Thank you again, Dolores.
Yes, thank you, Dolores.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Bill Burton, I heard your voice, and we thank you for being here. So thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next month.